to talk about. Today we're going to be reading a book, and we're going to be doing some activities before we read it, while we read it, and then after we read it, okay? So the name of the book is called Edward the Emu, and this is Edward. And just by looking at the front cover, who can tell me what Edward is? Casey. An emu, okay. Do you know what an emu is?
Isn't it a large bird?
It's a large bird, okay. Does anybody know where they usually live, Brandon?
Africa.
In Africa or maybe down under?
Saudi Arabia.
No.
Mexico. Egypt.
Australia. That's usually where they're found. So if I just hold the front and back cover up of the story, what do you guys think that this book is about? CJ?
A seal too.
A seal too? A seal and an emu? What about the seal and emu? Anybody help him out? Brandon?
Maybe the seal's going to help the emu not be stressed.
Okay, maybe the seal is going to help the emu not be stressed.
He's a mentor.
He's a mentor. Okay, great. So we know that the story's about an emu. We're not really too sure where the seal's going to come into play. So what we're going to do is, while we read, I want everybody to come up with a question. It might be one question, might be two questions that you have about the story, okay? This could be a question about the characters, could be a question about the plot or the setting or what's going on that you're not sure of. And we're going to stop in the middle of the story and we're going to talk about your questions and see if we can help each other answer them. Yes?
Write the questions now?
Yep, while we're reading.
Oh, well,
Okay?
Can I write one right now?
Sure. Okay, so the name of the story is called Edward the Emu. So let's start reading. And this is Edward. Edward was the emu, was sick of the zoo. There was nowhere to go, there was nothing to do. And compared to the seals that lived right next door, well, being an emu was frankly a bore. So he looks pretty bored, right? Just laying there?
Chilling.
So that night, when the zookeeper went home to bed, Edward jumped from his pen, and he laughed and he said, "The seals are the best, anybody can tell. So tomorrow I'll just be a seal as well." If there's any patterns that you guys see developing while we're reading the story, I want you to write those down too. The next morning at 9, when they opened the zoo, the seals were swimming, and Edward was too. He dived in the water and basked in the sun, and he balanced a ball on his beak just for fun. Well, Edward was really enjoying the day till he overheard someone behind the fence say, "The seals are always amusing, it's true, but the lion's the best to see at the zoo." So that night when the zookeeper went home to bed, Edward jumped from the pool and he smiled and said, "The lion's the best, anybody can tell, so tomorrow I'll just be a lion as well." He's leading the seal. The next morning at 9, when they opened the zoo, the lions were roaring, and Edward was too. He snarled at the ladies and growled at the men. Life was certainly grand for a lion in his den. What do you notice here in this picture, Hunter?
Well, it looks like he's the lion is going to eat Edward.
He could eat the emu? Okay. What else? They're copying each other. They're imitating. Edward's imitating the lion, right? Okay. Who has a question for me? Brandon, what do you have?
Why is Edward trying to be like all the other animals?
Why is Edward trying to be like the other animals? That's a really, really good question. Why? Does anybody know? I know it's kind of early in the story. He thinks it's boring being an emu. It's not as exciting as the other animals in the zoo. Hunter, what were you going to say?
She said,
Okay. What was your question?
what is the problem with Edward?
What is the problem with Edward? So Edward probably has, He has something, right? Something's bugging him that he doesn't want to be where he's at, where he's supposed to be. Yes? Sure.
Why doesn't any of the visitors say anything to the zookeeper
About,
meeting the lion?
that's a really good question. Did everybody hear what she said?
Yeah.
Why hasn't the zookeeper said, hey, there's an emu in the lion's den, right? Yeah, nobody's pointed that out yet. All we're doing is overhearing them say, right, who's the best? All right, let's go on. Here they are sleeping. Well, Edward was having a wonderful day till a man in the crowd had the gumption to say, the lion's a beast I shall always detest. The snakes are the things that I like to see best. So where do you think he's going from here?
Snakes.
Casey?
Snakes.
He's going to go see the snakes. So that night when the zookeeper went home to bed, Edward crept from the cage and he grinned and he said, if the snakes are the best thing, and that's what they say, then tomorrow I'll just be a snake for the day. I like that picture. The next morning at 9, when they opened the zoo, the snakes were all hissing and Edward was too. He slipped around the rocks, it was magic to see, then he curled himself casually up around a tree. Well, Edward was just warming up for the day when he overheard one of the visitors say, the snakes are impressive, I know that it's true, but the emu's by far the best thing at the zoo. Looks a little sad. The emu, gasped Edward. My goodness, that's me. I'm the thing that the gentleman most likes to see. Not the seals, the lions, the snakes, and the rest. It's Edward, the emu. He likes to see the best.
Looks like it's on
So that night, when the zookeeper went home to bed, Edward slipped from the cage and he laughed and he said, the emu's the best. Then that's easy then. Tomorrow I'm Edward, the emu again. Edward ran to the place where he used to reside, but oh, what a shock when he clambered inside. He found himself suddenly come face to face with an emu they'd brought to take Edward's place. Looks exactly like him, right?
It's not really short hair.
Thank you for that
shorter
observation.
beak too.
The emus considered each other for a while. Then the new emu said with a shy little smile, hello, I'm Edwina. It's nice meeting you. You're the best thing I've seen since I came to the zoo.
So you basically just the girl just basically said he looks like a girl. It's
No.
exactly the same.
Well, she's saying he's the best thing that she's seen since she's been to the zoo.
So they liked each other already.
So how did we answer our questions from the beginning? Right? We were talking about the problem. Yeah, what was the problem with Edward? So did we answer that question? What's the answer to that question?
He was bored.
He was bored. Bored of what?
Only like
Well, they didn't say nobody liked him. What was he bored?
Bored of just being an emu, not being able to do what he thought everyone else liked.
So he was bored being himself. Okay? So then another person, Brandon, was it you who asked why he was trying to be like the other animals, right? Did we figure that question out? Who wants to answer that question? Casey, you want to answer that question?
yeah, probably because the people were saying they were the best, so he wanted to be with them, so
Right.
he felt like he was the best.
Right, okay.
Good fan.
So he was overhearing the visitors and the zookeeper say, right, well, the snakes are the best and the lion's the best. So Edward wanted to
Be the best.
be the best. So with that being said, I want you guys to take a couple minutes and think about a time where you wanted to be the best. Was there a time in your life, or maybe a sibling or a friend that you know of, that have ever done anything to try and fit in? Have you ever tried to be another person or something? I want you to write it down. If you know a time and a place that maybe you did something, we don't have to share all of them, just those of you that would like to share, we can. But When's the time when you did something like Edward did, moving from place to place with the different animals to try and fit in and be the best, right? Because there's a lot of pressure for us to be the best, right? To a certain extent. We always want to be the cooler ones, and right? I did it. I cut and dyed my hair one time to fit in with some girls, and it didn't work out because the haircut didn't come out good, nor did the color. But I did it because I wanted to fit in. I wanted to look cool like everybody else. And you know what I found out? My hair looked the best just the way it was. I should have never even touched it. So, they're usually experiences to learn from, right?
Yes, I didn't do it.
You didn't do anything? Do you know of somebody? You gotta know some friends that have done something kind of silly to maybe fit in, right? All right, take a couple minutes, guys, and write down what you've come up with. A situation like Edward. Nothing?